Welcome to Fantasy Victory Now with Paul Charch, and I'm Mike Durkin. And Charch, some big news this week for the status of Adrian Peterson, learning that he will have a December 1st tentative start to his trial, which, do the math, he might be back at the earliest, week 14, but likely his season is done.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. There's probably a scenario out there where Adrian could get on the field, but it seems awfully remote. And for how many games at the bitter end of a season? I hate to say it because I was holding out faith that this hearing would result in a November hearing, which maybe we could have some resolution in November. But if we're all the way out to December, I just don't think it's worth carrying Adrian Peterson unless you're in a very large league. So at this point, I think you cut the cord and you move on. It's sad that it's worked out this way, but just the reality is, I think there's maybe a 10% chance that he sees the field this year.
Yeah, so the top of the running back class this year then has been DeMarco Murray, but Jason Garrett and the Cowboys actually want to cut his workload.
Well, and they should.
So what does that mean for owners? Do you still see DeMarco Murray being a dominating back this year, or will that cut workload with Seattle this week? Is that all going to make this perfect storm where you might want to sell high on DeMarco Murray?
It's a great opportunity to sell high on him. He's on pace for over 400 touches, which is unheard of for running backs. They've got to use him less, and he is injury prone. Now, he doesn't usually suffer the massive injury, but he's a guy who misses a few games here and there, comes into games questionable, game time decision. It's a great opportunity to sell high on him if you can get a lot. He's been about the only dependable high-end running back all year, so don't give him away. But if you can get a king's ransom for him, if you can get what amounts to as much as the best, highest-scoring running back in the league should get, then yes, I think this is a good opportunity to sell on DeMarco Murray.
All right, what's the outlook for two emerging runners? We have Bishop Sankey in Tennessee and Storm Johnson in Jacksonville, where they haven't been able to get the ground game going.
Yeah, well, let's start with Bishop Sankey. They told us last week he was going to get more work, and then he promptly got less carries than Sean Green last week, which was very disappointing. So the hope for Sankey is this week goes up against Jacksonville, that this is such a good opportunity that maybe this is going to be the week when he does something. Did nothing against Cleveland. So, I'm still optimistic that he's going to beat out Sean Green because Sean Green remains Sean Green. So the hope here is that we'll get better usage out of Sankey, and I do think going forward he's a guy to watch. And if you're feeling gutsy and you need a flex running back, you could start him this week. Let's go to Storm Johnson in Jacksonville. For Storm Johnson, this is a situation where Toby Gerhart's been awful, and he's hurt, so they almost have to give more looks to guys farther down the depth chart. Storm Johnson was the 7th rounder, and as a rookie, he hasn't gotten a lot of work. His first time on the field was last week when he had 5 carries and he did nothing with them. But he is a big back, and the theory is that at some point they got to start looking past Toby Gerhart and find somebody who can run the ball there. The problem is he's just non-athletic for Storm Johnson. I could see putting a couple of bucks in free agency on him, a desperation play this week. Maybe he gets some goal line opportunities where he should be effective, but frankly, his game's not that different than Toby Gerhart as a north-south runner who doesn't have great athleticism. So I'm not sure how much to expect there, but Storm Johnson is a guy worth watching to see how that rotation shapes up in Jacksonville.
Yeah, so maybe dial up some Titans-Jags on the Sunday ticket this week.
There you go.
Josh Gordon, when the substance abuse policy was revised this year, he was a guy you were saying, get on your roster, stash him for later. But he's only rostered in about 10% of leagues right now. Is he a guy, if you have a spot available, to run and grab now for that playoff push, or are you waiting on him?
I think the key word there was playoffs. If you're a team that's sitting right now, you're 5-0 or you're 4-1, and you feel like I'm going to the playoffs and you could afford to perhaps lose a game or two that you might not have lost by giving up the roster spot it takes to put Josh Gordon on your team, then yes. Then now's the time. Go get Josh Gordon while he's way out of people's minds. If you can afford that spot and you can maybe afford a loss that you wouldn't otherwise take. We know Josh Gordon's a supremely gifted athlete, and there's a chance that he will come on the field and have an immediate impact for the Browns.
All right, if you have Denver Broncos on your team this week, you're in luck. They are dominating the number 1 spots of the rankings at fantasyvictory.com, but they will be updated by Charch right up until kickoff on Sunday, so make sure to check them all at fantasyvictory.com.